Okay, thank you, Channing. So next we're going to move on to declarations. So the first part of filling out the claims package is the claims form that Channing just went over. And the second part are the declarations, and we're going to go through what those are.
So there are three types of declarations. And what declaration you complete is determined by the categories that you selected on your claims form. This is another way to corroborate the categories that you selected on your claims form. In addition to documents, there are these declarations. So the first type of declaration is the exposure declaration. Okay, this is something you will complete if you've selected categories 1 through 27, one of those personal injury categories. And the way to think about this is if you're saying that I had an elevated blood lead test because of the crisis, you need to demonstrate that it was in fact because of the crisis, that you were in fact exposed to the Flint water. Okay, the second type of declaration is a real property owner, renter, or business owner declaration. And you complete this form if you selected categories either 28, 29, or 30. And the last form of declaration is the business interruption form. And you complete this if you selected either category 29 or 30. So this is the sample of the declaration of exposure form. Beth, I'm just going to pull up my notes quickly because I cannot see it very well. Okay, so much of this should be completed as well because this will have a lot of your contact information that you provided on your registration form. So this will already have your name and address completed on it. But the main part of the declaration of exposure is to identify the addresses that you've lived in since the crisis. So since April 25, 2014, where have you lived? And what are your other potential places of exposure? Do you also work in Flint? Was your child going to school in Flint? Were they in daycare? We want to track the places of exposure to the Flint water. Okay, and the next type of declaration, I think we can skip this, Beth. So okay, the next type of declaration is the real property owner / renter and or business owner. And this declaration, you complete one for each Flint residence or business address from April 25, 2014 to date. So if you've lived in 3 different places since April 25, 2014, you will need to complete 3 of these forms. Okay. And on each one, in this prompt 2, you will identify the address for that form. So if you've lived in 3 different addresses, you'll have 3 forms. And in prompt 2, on each form, the address will be different. Okay. Then when you get to section 4 on the prompt, you are going to identify the owners or lessees of that particular property. You're going to identify the name, their current address, phone, email, nature of interest, and percentage of ownership / interest. So this may be something very simple for you. This may be you've lived in the same address throughout the crisis. You only have 1 form. You own that particular home, and you're just putting in your information, right? Your name, your current address, which happens to be that same address, your phone and email. Your nature of interest would be owner. And if you own it by yourself, the percentage of your ownership would be 100%. However, if you've rented a property with somebody else, you've split that rent, then you're going to need to identify yourself as a lessee along with your current address, phone and email, then identify yourself as a lessee, and then identify how much rent essentially you paid, right? If you split it with somebody 50-50, you're going to put 50% in that percentage of ownership / interest box. Then you're also going to need to identify the other renter for that property. Now, Beth, if you can go back just one sec. If this is for a business, you're going to do the same thing essentially in section 5. So section 4 is for residential addresses. Section 5 is for business addresses, but the same rules and same prompts apply there. The next type of declaration is a business interruption claim form. Again, you will need to complete one form for each business the client owned from, that you owned from April 25, 2014 to November 2020. So if there are multiple businesses, you're going to want to complete multiple forms. The main parts on here are identifying the business address, describing when and how the business was damaged, and then describing the dollar amount associated with that business damage and how you've determined that amount. And then finally, I want to make sure that you note on here that there are tax documents that must also be provided.
Okay, thank you, Channing. So those are the declaration forms in addition to the claims forms. Those are two separate pieces in the claims package. So this is the third piece, which is a release form. We're also going to have a fourth piece about a liability lien, and I will turn it back over to Channing to walk us through those.
The release form, this is something that folks may not be familiar with, but it is very common in the legal world. Okay, so if you bring a lawsuit against somebody and you settle, like we have here, you sign a release. Okay, what a release does is it says that you are not taking any further action against that particular defendant because you are receiving money, right? The defendant is not going to pay you if you're going to continue to litigate against them. So this is very standard. This is essentially how that litigation comes to a close. And you must sign this release in order to receive any funds under the settlement. Right, the next form is the lien disclosure form. Now, this is something that you may not have to complete. Okay, you only complete this form if you've been treated by a medical professional for a physical injury related to exposure to the Flint water crisis and have healthcare coverage. Okay, if you've had multiple healthcare insurers since the crisis, you will need to complete one form per carrier. So, and I just want to note that this does not apply to Medicaid healthcare coverage. So again, if you are confused about if you need to complete this form, you can contact us and we will have guidance on our website as well.